Hey, how's it going everyone? It's your boy Wags here, and if you're anything like me, you love city builder games, or really just any game that allows you to play God, build and simulate colonies, factories, workplaces, dynasties, the list goes on, and while everyone naturally sections off to their own corners of the genre, there are still some big name games that seem to be on most people's radar. Games like RimWorld and Stellaris, Cities Skylines and the Tropico series, and so many more that, sadly, I probably haven't even heard of. Maybe I was just too young to experience them at their peak, maybe they were just overshadowed by other games of their time. Maybe it's both. If you happen to remember Lionhead Studios, a game dev company founded all the way back in 1997 before eventually being bought by Microsoft in 2006 and officially shut down in 2016, you might be part of the small cult following the studio managed to rake in at the time. Fable, a fantasy action role-playing game released by Lionhead Studios in 2004, quickly captured the hearts of many, with the game letting your choices affect what kind of hero you became in the long run. Your actions would build a reputation for your character that would actively change the world around you. These early innovative gameplay ideas, combined with the story, and the fact that it was simply just a lot of people's first RPG, it's a widely held belief that the Fable game set a standard for today's role-playing games and how they should be written and developed. And then there's Black and White, a lesser known game but still a large commercial success of its time with a loyal following as well. Released in 2001 and actually Lionhead's first game, you assume the role of a god as you help or neglect the villagers of your world, all while raising and teaching an enormous godlike beast that you pick out personally and controlling it in order for it to carry out your bidding, whether that be good or evil. Both games delve into player choice and the consequences of your actions through magnificent storytelling and were hailed for being innovative of their time due to their interesting themes and the moral choices that were given to players throughout the games. Fable ended up receiving 2 more games in its series, and even Black and White got its own deserved sequel. Other than these 2 iconic classes though, there isn't much else to be said about Lionhead Studios, other than a few unreleased ideas at the time. But what manages to stay hidden in the dark even more is Lionhead Studios' third title that you've never heard of. The Movies. No, you heard that right, a video game called The Movies. A business tycoon simulation game released in 2005 puts players in the producer seat of their own filmmaking studio. You do everything, from hiring the actors and actresses to feature in your movies, building sets, planning out the script, releasing the movie, and my personal favorite, competing at the awards ceremony. Despite solid gameplay and reviews that, in my opinion, almost rival its predecessors, sales simply fell flat for a lot of reasons, a big one being that it was just a niche that didn't really need to be filled at the time. While the execution might have been great, it just didn't catch the attention of the proper fanbase like their previous games did. But that doesn't mean it's not worth a revisit to determine its true strengths and weaknesses. After all, the reviews had to account for something, and I was prepared to dive in and see what the movie-making business was really like. I figured the game wasn't going to be for sale anywhere since the company that made it was long gone, but after a little bit of researching and wishing into the stars above, a copy somehow managed to magically appear on my desktop. The game booted up just fine, and the older dev intros, not to mention the upbeat music, was an instant nostalgia hit for someone who grew up in the early 2000s. It also came with a Star Maker app that let you design custom actors and actresses to your liking before throwing them into your game. So following the whole BW trend for Boy Wags, I named my prime actor Benson Wagoli. I spiffed him up real nice and set his stats, made a few more key characters, but let's be honest, none of them were as important as Benson. It was time I jumped into the game and played my hand in the film industry. Full of confidence, I started the first tutorial and quickly found out that my characters were completely blacked out, with no textures, just floating eyeballs on a dark entity. Obviously not wanting to play like this, I scoured the internet and old 2006 chat rooms until I found a video from this awesome lad that quickly laid out the fix. Links in the description if you get this far and run into the problem. Thankfully it didn't take more than 5 minutes, and voila. The people now had bodies and faces. 2 key components they were going to need very much if they were going to make it on the big screen. So attempt number 2 went a little like this. I loaded into a brand new game, gave my film company a solid name as well as myself, and finally, it was time. Time to begin building my movie dynasty and take over Hollywood by producing some of the worst movies ever made. I already had some people lined up to help get the building started, but I wanted to plan the layout first. I started with everything we would need to plan out our first movie. I needed a stage school to hire my actors and directors, a script office to begin producing screenplays, a casting office to officially cast the movies, and a crew facility to hire the crew on set. Now, with a rough idea on where everything was stationed, I began putting together some hardy men and women to go around and officially begin the building process. The studio was enormous, with plenty of room for all the different kind of sets we'd soon be able to build. As the buildings began to finish their production, I went through and laid some beautiful pathing down and paved off the center area. To my surprise though, I was already beginning to round up some aspiring actors looking for a chance under the spotlight. But to their own surprise, I didn't care about any of them. I only cared about Benson Wagoli. I hired a few more of my created stars, with Giovanni being the director, hired and sent some screenwriters to work, hired a crew, and I guess when you have a bunch of employees running around, you should probably try to make sure there's a couple of bathrooms for them. And then obviously a snack van for a reason to use said bathroom. I decorated the place with pretty plants and shrubs, put fresh grass in, and realized our very first script was ready to be casted. I needed a lead, obviously Benson, our director Giovanni, and a random extra. This was also the first time I noticed this timeline at the top that showed me when current events would happen and what kind of shifts the movie market would make because of them. We also needed a set, so I had my builders throw together the nastiest piece of crap you've ever seen. I'm talking 2 boards of plywood with a sheet stapled to it type beat. But when you throw a backdrop on it and an actor like Benson Wagoli in front, it makes the scene much more bearable. In fact, it was pretty cool watching all these people take part in the production and actually seeing their contribution behind the scenes. Shooting the movie took a while for my inexperienced cast and crew, so in the meantime I built a script selling office where I could auction off scripts that my cast didn't have time to shoot. By the time the movie was done, I noticed money was dwindling very fast, which sucked because I also had to build a production office to even release the movie, and by then I was down to mere thousands despite being stacked with cash in the beginning. It was time to release our first movie, and I had extreme high hopes. All I wanted was to hit number 1 on the movie charts. But it turns out, the movie I made was complete garbage. And that's not even the worst part. Benson Wagoli was absolutely shamed in these reviews, and I was not going to stand for it. Of course, the only thing I could do was keep making bigger and better movies, and as I did, my experience would grow, and I would unlock new things like a makeover department to change my stars' clothes when certain fashions became out of style, and brand new sets to film my movies in. It was time for this year's awards ceremony, and despite going in confident, I didn't manage to pull in one single award. Thanks to Lioneer Productions and Creamboat Creations, which I can't help but think is some kind of innuendo. Nonetheless, I went back to work, improving the studio in every way possible, and obviously making more movies. My stars were also becoming full of themselves thanks to the big screen and demanded on-set trailers, so I went ahead and built those as well. I also got a bar, and with it, rehab. I guess you can't have one without the other, that is important, especially considering how often I was dragging my stars to the bar after work to relieve some built-up tension. Come on, you couldn't say I wasn't an amazing boss. Now take another drink, goddamn. It wasn't much longer though when I managed to unlock probably the coolest and most innovative feature this game has to offer. A feature you could really get lost in, by the way. The custom script office. And what this does is give you the opportunity to not only name and choose a genre for your script, but also to completely direct and build it at the same time, using hundreds of different character templates, sets, and props that I didn't even begin to mess with. There's so much to fine-tune in every scene with characters you can toggle on and off or move between scenes, allowing you to be as in-depth as possible or just slap something together quickly. The amount of assets here was just astonishing to me. I put together a unique scene and then threw it upon my stars to bring it to life. Again, it was just so cool to see how the game transitions from the movie editor to actually watching your stars perform exactly what you asked them to. I continued producing bigger movies and built much larger sets, expanding the studio tenfold. Eventually, I had reached a point where I had multiple directors and multiple movies shooting simultaneously, and when filming was over, my stars would again be dragged against their will to de-stress at our own on-set bar and restaurant. In fact, it's in every one of my stars' contract that they're never allowed to leave the studio. We have everything you need right here. There's no need to leave ever again. I quickly became addicted to building new sets. There were just so many of them, and I figured the more I had in the studio, the cooler the place would look, even if they weren't being used at all. I realize that probably isn't financially wise, but neither am I for the matter, so it's all good. It was time for another award ceremony, and I was more confident than ever, having released some very iconic movies such as Fixing Good, The Dinner Gang, The Slow and the Calm, and of course, Avatar. However, my overestimation of my own movie-making skills once again led to a shattering disappointment. Again, I received no awards for my valiant efforts in the film industry. So what did I do in response to my broken dreams? Well, I built more sets. And more sets. And in between when I wasn't building more sets, you know what I was doing? That's right, I was building more sets. A madman, they called me for spending this much money on new sets when they weren't even in use. But I had a plan, you see. At the end of the last award ceremony, they teased the award for next year's, being the prestigious Lot Award, meaning the more beautiful my studio was, the better chance I had at finally taking home an award. So along with continuing to spend an ungodly amount of money on random film sets, my stars did their best to keep up as I hurried them from production to production. And I know what you're wondering. Well, Wags, did your plan even work? Did your endless desire for a flashy studio end up winning you your award? Well, actually, it did, for your information. I finally won an award and proudly received the prestigious Lot Award. Only problem was it wasn't just 1 year later. Or 2. It was 15 years later. And at this point in the game, I had already produced multiple movies, been to multiple award ceremonies, built way too many sets, and small things were starting to become overwhelming. I was sick of catering to my selfish stars, and it seemed like no matter what I accomplished, I was never going to meet my goal of having a movie go #1. And that wasn't even the worst part of it all. My main director, Giovanni, had reached the age of retirement, and unfortunately, there wasn't really any fine print in his contract that would allow me to hold him here making movies forever. So I had to let him go. With Giovanni being my most skilled director and now retired, I had basically no chance at accomplishing the goal I set out for. In all honesty though, I had been playing the game for probably 5 to 10 hours at this point, and the gameplay loop is ultimately the same from here on out. Depending on how active you want to be in the creation of your movies, the game takes forever to progress. The coolest part is definitely watching the production of your films combined with the new flashy sets, new costumes, up-to-date equipment, and better filming gear as time passes in game. It's honestly really cool until it gets really old. And sure, I could sit here for the next 20 to 30 hours repeating the loop in order to accomplish my goal of having a movie hit #1, but I'm a simpler man, a smarter man. So despite the game being released as early as 2005, I wonder to myself, might there be any mods for this game? Turns out to my surprise there are, and they're still easily and readily available for download on the movies3d.com website. Once again, I managed to be impressed because there was a pretty sizable collection here of sets, props, costumes, and so much more that players themselves contributed to the game. A real tribute to just how long modding communities have been helping games over the years. I managed to come across exactly what I was looking for, an experience mod that, by the sounds of it, made stars gain max experience just by working. So I dragged this little settings file into my game's data folder and went back to make one last movie. Immediately, my new director and stars were max skilled in the genre they were shooting, and my screenwriters were churning out new screenplays faster than ever before. The time came to release the final movie, and I did so with no negative reviews whatsoever. The movie shot to the top of the leaderboards right away, rightfully capturing the #1 spot for That Boy's movies. The money was flying in, and it was the perfect time to wrap things up in my eyes, because I obviously sucked at making movies. Hey everyone, thank you all so much for watching and taking the time out of your day to stop by and support me in the channel. As always, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you find the content entertaining or engaging in any way, because it all helps me out in the long run. And please, let me know down below if you had heard of the movies before this, and if so, what were your experiences with it? I think it's fun to revisit old games like this featuring concepts we don't normally see as often. Let me know if you played Fable or Black and White as well, and what got you into those games. Again, thanks for watching. I had a blast playing. Now here's a real blast playing.